if you can feel the same suffering from the person you know and the person you don't, then we're on the path towards virtue, because ultimately both love and compassion come down to proper identification. The role of compassion. Compassion, that's obviously a good thing, right? That's obviously virtuous. Is feeling the pain of a stubbed toe virtuous? Is disliking that pain virtuous? Wanting to be beyond that pain, wanting to not experience that discomfort, is it virtuous? Well, that's quite relevant to our individual approaches to compassion. Compassion means to suffer with. Passion, the root word being pati. It's the same root as patience, actually. Passion, suffering, compassion, suffering with. This came up recently with a listener asking me a question online, asking if compassion is always a virtue, and wondering if it is because they have a friend that suffers from substance abuse and it's kind of tearing them up inside. And the philosophical answer is, it depends. It's not what you do, it's what you do it for. Are you suffering with them because out of discomfort you wish that it wasn't a distracting, distressing condition that they were dealing with because they're a close friend and you happen to know their spouse and their 2 kids, and you just wish, out of perhaps the innocence of those 2 children, that you and your circle of friends were not dealing with this situation. From a high level, if it's not compassion for all living beings, then it's not compassion in the virtuous sense. It's just preferential attachment. This is same with love. If there isn't a love for all living beings, then it's just preferential attachment. If you only love, you say love, you feel, you think you feel love for one person, that isn't love. That is just preferential attachment to them over other people. To tap into the well of love, which is seeing no otherness in the world, according to Vedanta. Seeing no otherness in the world is not a partial identification with this person, but not these other 7 billion. That's the same as identifying with your 2 hands, identifying with your body, a preferential identification with this, but none of that, not those people. And loving oneself is not, it's certainly not the hallmark of the virtue of love that gets talked about with something like Christianity, or unconditional universal love. That is one of the hallmarks of any realized being. Certainly within the Vedantic tradition, love is really only talked about in terms of universal love. Love as a virtue is prioritized. It is a pillar of a realized being. It's a pillar of the talking points of what a realized being emanates. How you could recognize, pattern match a realized being, but it is the universal love. Not, wow, that sage was realized because they had love for that one other person, their mother or their spouse. She was certainly an enlightened being because she had love for her one child. No, that's never the pattern of a realized being. Love is seeing no otherness in the world, a pure identification. Not a partial, not a preferential identification. And it's the same for compassion. We think of love as a good thing if you love 1 or 2 people, but this philosophical lens says, no, that's not that. That's just preferential attachment. That's like saying protecting your community, serving your community is a virtuous task. And then you zoom in and it's like, no, you're only serving yourself. Just because you're part of the community does not mean you're serving the community. Love applied in bits and pieces is not love. It is preferential and most often has to do with what that person can do for you, what that child can do for you or represents. It is the extension of your reputation in the community. What people think of you. If you can make that child this beacon, this sports star, this A+ student, it's an extension of how people are going to view you. It's preferential. That spouse that you love, but the community that you don't, that is so often tied around what can they do for you. Compassion is kind of the other direction. It's not what can they do for you that's guiding that preferential attachment. It's, that really sucks and it's really bringing me down. What they're going through is a distraction from these higher things that I want. It's a downer. If the preferential attachment of love is these people accelerate me towards what I want, what I desire, the preferential attachment of compassion, the non-virtuous type that we often talk about, think about when we say I've got compassion for a friend that has a substance abuse problem. It is not compassion in the virtuous sense. It is merely preferential attachment towards a desire that has been interrupted by that person that's suffering. The friend that gets in a car accident, the family member that gets fired or let go, and you feel this emotional parity with them, just feeling that emotion, feeling sad, and you feel that emotional parity with them, feeling sad, feeling their suffering. Just because we feel it doesn't mean it's virtuous. Wanting it to go away has nothing to do with virtue. Compassion, to suffer with, unless it's applied to all suffering. Expanded, continuously expanded in our spiritual progression to the suffering of all living beings. If you can feel the same suffering for your friend with a substance abuse problem, a friend with major mental illness, a war-torn country 15,000 miles away, and if you can feel the same suffering from the person you know and the person you don't, then we're on the path towards virtue, because ultimately both love and compassion come down to proper identification. And only identifying with the people closest to you, that you feel their temperature when it rises or falls, you feel their pain, suffering, their highs, their lows, when they rise, when they fall, that is just preferential attachment and wishing their pain away. It might not be virtue. It might simply be the mind and its attachments. It's preference for comfort over discomfort. Not much different than stubbing your toe and wishing you hadn't. So what do we do with this question of whether it is true compassion or just discomfort that we wish didn't exist? Well, just like love, invest in this increasing ring of identification. Identify with that friend. Identify with that family member. Identify with the stranger you see multiple times on your way to work that seems down and out. Identify with them and continually increase that radius of identification from you to your household, to your community, to your state, to your region, to your country, to all human beings, than to all living beings. That's what this philosophy says, is know your level, know where you are, know when it's not virtue and it's just preference. Know your level, but like climbing a ladder, go from there. Reach for the next rung until we reach what we are capable of. And what this philosophy says we are capable of is infinite, is incalculable, what we are capable of and what those around us are capable of. So often misguided compassion turns into these attempts to help when really that person needs to go through what they're going through. It's like confusing niceness with love. Sometimes to suffer with is, yeah, I'm going to let them suffer with this frustration, this emotion, this challenge. And not go and, like I've said before in the podcast, go into the gym and just take the weights off of everybody's bars and lift all the weights for them. Perhaps compassion oftentimes is seeing them in the midst of challenge and discomfort. Not trying to remove it from them, but wisdom is the capacity to see the end in the beginning, recognize that, oh, this might be the very best thing for them. It's to go through that challenge, not for you to go in and pick them up and carry them over it. It is one of the pillars of parenting, especially in recent years of raising resilient kids, is letting them sit in frustration. Perhaps not existential frustration, but increasingly more and more frustration, starting with the mild and lightest forms, but increasingly more and more frustration so that they can recognize, wow, I can not only handle this amount of frustration, but recognize their capacity for how much frustration they can handle. Compassion, love, with that lens of seeing the end in the beginning often takes such a different shape than what we see in TV shows and movies. The virtuous kind of compassion, it doesn't often look like a warm embrace or crying when you see a friend crying. Sometimes it looks like the hard-nosed coach that knows you're going to reach new heights because of an expectation that you can actually handle what you're going through. You discover something in yourself that you wouldn't have otherwise, because the person sees your potential, sees your capacity, maybe when you can't. Says the right, sometimes hard thing. Not unnecessarily hard. Not unnecessarily adding to the challenge, but also not unnecessarily removing the challenge, or just emotionally wallowing with you, but providing no insight or wisdom, or worse, providing no example, influence, right in plain sight for them to be inspired by. Because as we covered in a recent episode, the 5 ways that we can help those around us: financially, physical presence, emotional presence, with wisdom. Out of the 5 most important ways that we can help those around us, as outlined by this philosophy, the most important work we can do for others is the work we do on ourselves. Because that cascades into the influence, the example, the walking example that the people around us can reference. The Gita says it renders all of our actions, a philosophical life will render all actions attractive. People will just be like, dang, I want what that person has. That life design that they have, the ease in which they seem to do all of the work on their plate. Man, whatever they're doing, I want to do that too. Then it cascades into wisdom, shared insights, said in the right way at the right time. Then it cascades into emotional presence. Maybe shedding a tear at the same time, but doing it from a place of wisdom instead of a place of confusion, being overwhelmed like your friend, coming from a place of insight instead of coming from a place of feeling afraid, powerless in the midst of that friendship. Then it cascades into that physical presence. And sometimes it cascades into the financial component of the ways in which we can help, the ways in which we can suffer with. But one thing is certain, the virtuous approach to compassion is not partial. It's not preferential. It's not a disguised version of you just looking out for yourself, your emotions. It is selfless. It is a function of identification. Ideally, increasing that ring of identification. You might be in the trenches with that person, getting down in there with them. But beyond just being a shoulder to cry on, you are a beacon of clarity. That is the virtuous approach to compassion. And that is today's reflection on the Daily Vedantic. We'll see you next time.